Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, back with Paul Zeise for our weekly Zeise is Right video here on the Post-Gazette YouTube channel. Paul, how are you?
I tell you, I've had a rough 5 days in bed sick. This is my first day up and moving around, so hopefully I'm doing a lot better than I was a couple of days ago, that's for sure.
Well, we got a lot of news, Paul, so we're going to try to keep it short today, but we're going to try to get through a lot too. So if you haven't checked out our channel yet, please subscribe so you don't miss any of all the talk we have this week. We're going to get into the Steelers first because free agency is happening hot and heavy, and then we're going to get into some March Madness a little bit later. But yeah, Paul, I guess I just wanted to start with, we're recording Wednesday afternoon. The most recent, noteworthy signing is Cole Holcomb, the middle linebacker from the Commanders. He's got a pretty good reputation in run defense. I don't think he's extraordinary. He's not Ryan Shazier, but is he what this defense needs as, kind of a reliable run stopper in that spot?
Do we know what the number is yet in terms of how much he got?
I did not see a number as of now, no.
Because it sounds to me like, it sounds to me like they got rid of or let Robert Spillane go somewhere else and got another Robert Spillane. So if it's for more than $4 million, isn't that what did Robert Spillane get? 2 years, $9 million, I think is what he got with the Raiders or something, right? I think it was $9 million, maybe over 2 years. So if it's $4.5 million or more, to me, it's silly. It really is. I mean, I know, I've already seen all of the usual suspects on Steelers Twitter lining up to explain how Robert Spillane was the worst player that's ever played in the Steeler uniform and how this guy is going to be an incredible upgrade. If you listen to or read, and I read some guys from the Washington Times, read a guy from the Washington Post. If you read anybody that actually has covered the Commanders, and that they're named the Commanders or the Washington team or whatever they're called, the scouting report on him is he's a good run stopper, not really great in coverage. Who does that sound like, Adam? Who does that sound like? Actually, you had a guy here like that last year that actually knows the defense, and that's what he was. And, so to me, I guess if he's cheaper, if he's a cheaper, version of Robert Spillane, I guess that's good. It's always good to save salary cap money and salary cap numbers. But, I mean, Adam, really, does this change your thoughts on the defense at all?
I think I have a sunnier view of this guy than you do. I'm not going to say he's going to be like a great player. If anyone's out there saying that it's going to be a huge upgrade on Robert Spillane, like I'm not in that camp. But I did a quick study of the analytics, the PFF grades, stuff like that, and I think he's like a solid player. And I don't know that Robert Spillane always was. I don't know that Robert Spillane was always good in run defense. He had times when he looked good in run defense, but there were games that he was awful in run defense. And that is a principal reason that the Steelers struggled in my mind. So I think this guy's a little more solid in that facet of the game. Yeah, he probably sounds similar if he's not, as athletic and, gets toasted in coverage. But, I guess that's what you're going to get if you wait until, day 3 of the market. So that's kind of my outlook on that.
The number is going to be the most important thing. If they got him for like $3.5 million or $3 million or something like that, so they saved a few bucks from Robert Spillane, then I guess it's a good deal. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it's some great upgrade or makes them better. I don't know that it's a piece of the puzzle other than hopefully it's their third inside linebacker like Spillane was, and they're basically in the same place they were last year. The bigger question is, what happens with Devin Bush? What happens with Devin Bush's position? I mean, there's some bigger questions that I would say that are out there among inside linebackers. And again, it's good that they were able to sign a guy, but we have to just see what this guy actually does in terms of, is he an upgrade over Robert Spillane?
Yeah. I mean, just to me, it doesn't have to be huge. It's just got to be something. If it's not, we're going to look back on that 3-year term, especially. I think it's saying that's a lot. Paul, I think the second biggest headline that we haven't already addressed, we talked about Patrick Peterson on Tuesday on this channel. I'll get your thoughts on him in a little bit. But since we last talked Steelers on this YouTube channel, the second biggest move, I think, was Larry Ogunjobi coming back. Maybe it's the biggest move, Paul. I don't know. We're just familiar with him, so maybe it's not as controversial. I think a lot of people wanted him back. What did you think of the move to bring him back on a 3-year deal?
I didn't hate it. I don't know that I loved it, but I didn't hate it either. I think he clearly is a position in need. When he was healthy and playing, he was very productive in a lot of what he did. Obviously, health has always been a little bit of a factor with him, but they need that position. And, similar to what I just said about Spillane, I think if he can stay healthy, he knows the defense, he fit in well, he proved that he can be a productive player for them. I don't have a problem with it because eventually you have to sign some of your own guys, right? You can't try and plug every single hole with guys from the outside. And I think that he's good enough and shown that he's good enough, and especially when he was healthy and started really playing well, right? He's very productive. So you almost have to, if you're going to take a shot at somebody, take a shot at a guy who, maybe has a few injury issues right now, but you hope that over the next couple of years he can stay healthy and give you what he gave you when he was playing well. Because I thought there were some games he really showed up. He really, really showed up in a big way. And so to me, I actually don't have a problem with that deal. I'm not in love with it, but I don't have a problem with it because I do think there's upside with him. And there's the ability, that he has. He could be the kind of guy that really solidifies their defense.
Does this change your outlook for the draft at all? I've seen a lot of people saying, "Hey, they need a guy who's in the interior of that line who can do things," and now they have that guy, but they're still pretty old. Between Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi. Do you still look for a guy high in the draft, or is that maybe a position now you can address a little bit lower in the draft? Maybe take a flyer on a 5th, 6th round guy who can maybe turn into something with a couple years of development.
Well, I think what he gives you is the luxury that you don't have to go get a guy like him early in the draft. That's the big thing. You signed a guy who's going to give you at least another, year or two, really pretty good years, right? Maybe he gets through all 3, but we'll see. Because like you said, he's old. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to get at least 2 years out of him. And so it gives you the luxury to say, all right, if we have a guy that we really, really like that's there when we pick early in the draft, we can take him. But we don't have to reach for a guy. We don't have to take a guy early that maybe is, a guy who we're not really in love with or sold on, and we would like him maybe in a later round. You don't have to make those kind of decisions because like I said, when you bring your own guys back and you fill some of the holes, quote unquote, that you have with your own guys, it really gives you a little bit more flexibility in the draft. And that's what if you're Omar Khan, you're Andy Weidel, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the idea of, hey, when we get to the draft, we want to be able to have some options as to what position we can go to and who we can take. And that's why this, next month or so when they're, signing free agents and they're bringing guys in, that's why it's such an important part of the whole off season, because you want to get to the draft and know exactly what you need.
Damontae Kazee is coming back at safety on a 2-year deal. I think a lot of people liked how he played in a small sample size last year. I know I did. I think he scored very well. He was a playmaker. I like the way they used him, Terrell Edmunds, and Minkah Fitzpatrick in concert with each other at times. What do you think about that deal, Paul? Was that a good get there?
Yeah, I think a 2-year deal is good for him. Like you said, he was the kind of guy that flashed. There was times when there was, a big play, he would make a big play here or there, or he would show up on film. He seems to be a playmaker. I would say that, that's the kind of guy you want to bring back. He obviously gives you depth. There's a lot of different things you can do with him in your defense. He's shown a lot of versatility for them. So again, much like Ogunjobi, I think he's if you're going to bring one of your guys back, and you can bring him back at a price that fits what you're looking for in your salary cap, he's exactly the kind of player you want to bring back, because who knows, over the next 2 years he might grow into something, where he has an expanded role and he becomes a somebody that really is out there on the field in a lot of critical downs and can make big plays for you. So yeah, I like that deal as well. Again, I didn't hate the Holcomb deal. I don't want people to think I hate the Holcomb deal, but I think there's some people that are trying to convince themselves that this is some major upgrade over Robert Spillane. I don't think it is. If they got him for less money, then that's really what the goal is. So I don't hate that. I just wasn't in love with it. The Ogunjobi move, I probably like more than that. And this move, I mean, I think that it's a one of those moves you have to make in the offseason. I don't know that it makes you. I don't know that it breaks you, but it keeps a player with some potential in your stable to see what he can do over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think he was only targeted 4 times in coverage last season. Granted, you really only played that last third of the schedule, but it's still pretty good to only get targeted 4 times. So, I mean, he was covering his side of the field pretty well. Paul, the last move that I think we have as of the time we're recording is Nate Herbig added on a 2-year deal. He's a guard added to the offensive line. He was with the New York Jets previously. Do you have any strong feelings about that other than it looks like Kendrick Green's bust status is about to become official?
I think I really like the move, to be honest, because I think the other part of it is, here's a guy that's got starting experience. Doesn't he have some kind of tie to Weidl? I think, didn't he play with the Eagles or something? I think there was some kind of tie to Weidl where he's very familiar with his work. But either way, my point is you bring in a guy that's got a veteran guy who's had success as a starter. You bring a guy like that in, it signals that you're not afraid to say, okay, the Kendrick Green thing's got to end. It was a really bad reach, a horrific draft choice. We picked a guy who probably isn't good enough to play any position, much less the position we picked him for, which was center. And so you are basically saying we acknowledge that was a mistake. But the other thing you're doing is, you've got James Daniel, you've got Kevin Dotson. At the end of camp, you might be able to part ways with one of those guys now. And maybe you save a few bucks or whatever, on your cap or whatever. So it gives you flexibility. So I always think you should bring in, a veteran offensive lineman, not a stiff, but somebody that actually might be able to play and help you, because I think what happens is it gives you some flexibility of what you do with your offensive line. And so to me, I think it's a great move. It's, of all the moves that they made, it's the one I like the most.
Okay, that's a stronger take than I was expecting, but I think it's definitely a worthy discussion of how this offensive line moves forward. And I've said before, I think my big frustration with the Penguins right now is that they're not willing to acknowledge their mistakes, and I think it is a good sign for this new front office that they're willing to cut bait on things that aren't working. So, granted, we don't know.
Let's face it, Kendrick Green he's just not big enough. Number one, he's not big enough, and as a result, he's not strong enough. And so, and the other thing is he's not a great center. And so now you got to move him to guard, but he's not big enough. He's probably not strong enough. And so you can't move people out. He doesn't have a position in the NFL. Unfortunately, if he had spent 4 years at Illinois at center, right, as opposed to 8 games or whatever it was, if he had 4 years and committed to playing center, and really maybe he'd have a shot. But at the end of the day, it's not an on-the-job training type of position, and he's just so far away from being a good center. Can't play him there, and then we saw what happens when you put him at guard. So, again, like you said, when you make a mistake, the worst thing you can do is keep doubling down on the mistake, right? Like, for instance, keep putting Jeff Carter, who's 97 years old and can't move, out on the ice every night. So that's a different story for a different day, but it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, at some point, you've got to say, listen, we signed this guy to a really big deal, like relative to his age and everything else. We gave him a pretty good deal in hockey terms, but guess what? He can't play anymore. So you can't put him out there on the ice anymore. But that's a different story for a different day. To me, I think the worst thing you do is, when you make a mistake, keep doubling down on it. And the Steelers, at least right now, it looks like they're finally just going to say, okay, we gave it 2 years. It's just not going to work with this Kendrick Green. Got to move on.
Paul, can I get your quick thoughts on Patrick Peterson, and then maybe what's left on your Steelers free agency wish list? As we go through the rest of the week here, any big things sticking out to you?
I understand why they didn't sign Cam Sutton because of the number that he got. It was a lot of money for essentially a number 2 corner. I think people, again, are deluding themselves into thinking they made a major upgrade by getting Patrick Peterson at this point in his career. He had 5 interceptions or whatever, and everybody's all goo-goo about that. Who cares? I mean, interceptions for corners a lot of times are more luck than they are anything that, you know what I mean? Some of the best corners around don't ever get intercepted. 1, because nobody ever throws it at them. And 2, because they're in coverage or whatever, and they don't have opportunities. But my point is, I think it fills a need from the standpoint of you got a body in there. He's probably still good enough, to play 17 games for you and do, what you need him to do. But he's not Patrick Peterson from 4 years ago or whatever. He's not, a guy in his prime. It also doesn't address, I think, their biggest need, which is still they need a real, legitimate, shutdown, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, number 1 corner. Moving on from Sutton, the money was a lot. They got Peterson for a lot cheaper. Okay, makes a lot of sense. But if they made their cornerback room better, I don't think that they necessarily have done that. On some level, maybe they have, because Peterson, I think, a wily old veteran who, knows how to get it done, and still, despite the fact that maybe he's lost a half a step or whatever, still knows how to use his smarts to do things. But, I mean, what are we talking about here? They still need a corner, right? They still need an inside linebacker, period. Those 2 positions they still absolutely need. Even though they just addressed them somewhat in free agency, they still need those 2 positions. They've got Trent Scott, so they probably don't need a tackle because they got 3 tackles, and they're probably going to be okay with those 3 tackles. But if you think about it, they've addressed guard in a lot of ways. They need a receiver. And by bringing back Ogunjobi, they lessen their need for defensive line. So, to me, I still say the 3 things they need to be looking for early in the draft: corner, inside linebacker, receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Peterson signing because I think he does make you a little bit better on the outside at the cost of some versatility. But you still have the ability to address, maybe you can reproduce Cam Sutton in the aggregate and have a couple guys that can do what he did. So I'm still optimistic about that move. Paul, but I want to move on now to March Madness. Pitt with an ugly, not pretty, whatever adjectives you want to use, win over Mississippi State to advance into the main draw of the NCAA tournament. Is that kind of what you expected? I feel like we talked about this Sunday night and said, hey, this is a team that they can beat, and they did.
Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing people say, well, if they had Federico, it would have been a different game. Maybe it wouldn't have been. I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is Mississippi State is a team that can't score. They struggle to score. And so, they hit a few threes early, and then what happened? They woke up and what I think they were like 2 of their last 17 or 2 of their last 18 or something from 3, including one that was absolutely wide open. That in my estimation, every scholarship player in America, given an 18, 19-footer, that wide open, if you're a perimeter player and you can't bury that, I mean, that should be a 9 out of 10 shot, right? I mean, I don't care what anybody says. There was no pressure there, on no defense, no pressure. He had a good look at it. He was able to step into it the way he wanted to. He set his feet. He caught the ball. There was nobody even running and closing out at him. He's got to make that shot. But either way, the reality of the situation is that kind of is how the game is. What I saw last night, Adam, 2 teams that deserve to be in Dayton. 2 flawed teams that made the tournament by the skin of their teeth that deserve to be in Dayton. That's what I saw. So, I mean, listen, I'm happy for Pitt. I know it's been a long time for Pitt. It was a good night for them. They were able to win and all that other stuff. Nothing about that game shocked me. And you know what? It's kind of interesting. Iowa State is very similar in that they're a grinded out team. They don't score a ton. I think they score about 68 points a game. They like the pace, and they're a team, unfortunately, I know way too much about because I, every so often throw a few dollars on basketball games. And one of the things I learned pretty quickly with them is they're not a pace team. They're not in that pace. If you're betting the over with them, you're going to be, struggling or sweating it out almost every night because they want to try and slow it down, grind it out. The difference is they've got a guy who actually is a dangerous offensive player. If Mississippi State had one person that you were afraid of offensively, that team would be so much different than they are, because then you'd actually have to worry about playing the perimeter. But, nothing that happened last night, when Pitt played Mississippi State, nothing was surprising to me. I knew it was going to be a grinded out game, and I knew that probably Pitt was going to win because they're a little better offensively.
What pick are you making for that Pitt-Iowa State game, Paul?
I'm going to tell you, I like Pitt. I do. And I think it's because what wins in the NCAA tournament is, contrary to all the, defense wins championships and all that other stuff. If you look at all of the numbers that are out there over the course of time in the NCAA tournament, you know what wins in the NCAA tournament? Offense. It does. I mean, you've got to play, obviously, some defense. That's it. But look at the teams that win. I mean, the one year Virginia won, magically they just happened to find 3 NBA guys, and they were, playing at a pace much faster than they had ever played before and ever played since. And they were scoring at about, you know what I mean? The reality is, you have to be able to score, because as you saw with Mississippi State last night, if Mississippi State, I said this before, Mississippi State is they reminded me so much of some of those Jamie Dixon teams, right? That they're big, physical, right? Offensive rebounding supplements your offense. You've got, but the one thing is, even those Jamie Dixon teams had a guy like Ronald Ramon that could actually hit threes, right? If that Mississippi State team had a guy like Ronald Ramon that you actually had to worry about out there, and their bigs were better at rotating the ball, that team would be a real pain in the ass to play against. But when your entire shtick is we've got to keep the game slow, we've got to play big and physical and slow and defend and keep the game close to the 60s as we can, right? In this case, it was in the 50s for most of the game. It's hard to win, and I think I have a sneaking suspicion that Pitt is going to be able to outscore Iowa State. And if they can get get a game in a situation of where, Pitt's guys are hitting their threes, I have a feeling they're going to win it. I do. I think actually, I expect them to be playing in the Sweet 16 against, who is it, Xavier? Let me look at. I think it's Xavier is who they would be playing if they get to the where are they at over here on this little thing here? I think it'd be Xavier, wouldn't it? Isn't that who they're?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I expect fully that Pitt is going to be playing Xavier for a chance to get to the Sweet 16. Interestingly enough, Adam, this is what people don't realize. And I hate to get on this little soliloquy here, but humor me on this. The NCAA tournament is all about matchups, okay? Which is why it's almost always so silly when people, say, well, hey, he didn't get to a Final Four. He did this. Obviously, over the course of time, you've got to win games. You know what I mean? In the NCAA tournament, you got to win games. But sometimes you get a bad matchup. And I'll give you a great example. If Pitt was a 10 and Penn State was the 11, and Penn State got Mississippi State and Pitt got Texas A&M, Pitt would be going home, right? Pitt would be going home because they wouldn't beat Texas A&M. And Penn State would pound, Mississippi State, right? And they probably would beat Iowa State. But I actually like Pitt's path, you know what I mean? And then to get to the Sweet 16, they're going to have to beat Texas, Penn State. So even though Pitt is an 11 seed and Penn State's a 10, I actually like Pitt's path better than I like Penn State's because it's about matchups. I think Texas A&M would be a really bad matchup for Pitt. But they're lucky that they're getting Iowa State instead of Texas A&M.
You led in well to my next question, Paul, which is with a couple more days to digest things. What do you think of that Penn State Texas A&M game? I think the line has moved from like something like 2 to open to now it's Penn State's a 3-point underdog. I think Penn State has some common DNA with Pitt, and you said it'd be a bad matchup for Pitt. Do you think it's a bad matchup for Penn State?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Penn State, again, Penn State, and we can say this about a lot of teams, but Penn State and Pitt are two of the most three-ball reliant teams when it comes to winning at winning at a high level that there probably are in the field. Both of them have to hit threes, and I think that's the biggest thing when you look at Penn State. A&M, I think, is a lot more versatile in terms of their scoring. They're a lot more versatile in how they can play than Mississippi State. That's the big thing. They can beat you in a couple of ways, and I think that's something that doesn't go unnoticed. Now, the question is, do they have anybody that can handle Jalen Pickett? Because Jalen Pickett, when he's going, is the best player on the floor most nights. And when you're in the NCAA tournament and you have the best player on the floor, you've got a shot to win every game, regardless of who the other four guys are. So I kind of like Penn State. I kind of like Penn State from the standpoint of the thing I like about the way they played down the stretch and in the NCAA or in the Big Ten tournament. I thought they got much better on the defensive end at times. I thought they got tougher. I thought there were some times during the season when they let teams make runs and they just couldn't get up off the mat, you know what I mean? And they ended up just sort of losing some games where if they just responded to a run, they probably would have won. In the Big Ten tournament, man, they did all that stuff. Other teams made runs at them. They made runs at other teams. They got way down to Purdue and came all the way back and had a shot, basically to win the game. They really, I thought that, the game that was in Indiana, they played in the semis, right? That was Indiana.
Yeah.
That was the game that I said, I think Penn State can maybe make a run in the NCAA tournament. I loved their toughness at the end of that game. I loved how they won the game, how they closed the game. I love that they had adversity throughout the game. You know what I'm saying? And they just kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and they ended up winning it. I think Penn State's going to win. I don't know if they can beat Texas, but I think they can beat Texas A&M. I don't know it's a great matchup for them, but I just kind of like their DNA. I like their makeup. I just sort of like how they're playing right now, And anytime you got the best player on the floor, I like you. I like your chances.
Yeah, Paul, I think the thing with Penn State for me is that despite this run they've been on, they've had to grind out pretty much every single one of these games. Maybe the Indiana game a little less so, but we haven't really seen them play that game where they just shoot the lights out of the gym like they did early in the season at Illinois, like they did against Indiana at home early in the season. They beat good teams badly because they were just hitting a ton of shots. We haven't seen them have that game on this recent run here. I wonder if Texas A&M is the team that's about to catch it, or maybe that'll be Texas in the following round if Penn State can advance.
What I like about them is their top 5 scorers. I'm looking at it. I wanted to make sure. Their top 5 scorers all shoot 38% or better from 3. And 3 of those guys shoot 40 or better. So, again, they're a hard team to guard. They're a hard team to defend. And if 3 of those guys are on, I mean, they can turn your lights out quickly. So I really like Penn State. I like Penn State a lot more than I like West Virginia. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I think West Virginia, to me, I think I've made it very clear. I think they're a classic example of a team that their conference strength and, metrics pulled them into a field they didn't belong in. But that's just me. So I like Penn State's chances. I like Pitt's chances. I think I'm going to call it right now. I think Pitt and Penn State will be playing in the second round with a chance to go to the Sweet 16.
That'd be pretty great for local basketball fans, Paul. We waited a long time for this. Are there any other games on this bracket that now that you've had a chance to really pour through things, any potential upsets or just games that you're really excited to watch in this first round?
Well, you're not a big time old school college basketball fan if you're not licking your chops at the prospects of Dan Hurley and UConn against Rick Pitino and Iona. There's just so many storylines in that thing, especially for an old Big East guy like me. How can you not love that matchup. Iona versus UConn. And here's the thing: there are some people that pick UConn to go to the Final Four, which I think they can. I could also see them losing tomorrow to UConn. The other game, I'll tell you, there's a couple of games that are on the first round that I think are going to be very, very interesting. Okay, I like Arkansas, Illinois as well. That could be I love Musselman and the way he coaches. And I think Illinois, I've watched them and I thought, man, this team is unbelievable. And then I've watched them and said, this might be the worst team I've ever seen. At the end of the day, it comes to me so Illinois is a wild card game, but that could be a really fun game to watch. Especially, I don't know if you've watched Arkansas. They play a pretty fun style of basketball at times. At times they're ugly as well, which is why they're both an 8 and a 9. Of course, who does Jamie Dixon gets an 11? I know those of us who watch Jamie Dixon's teams in the tournament. I think they get the winner of tonight's game, right? Don't they get the winner of tonight's 11 versus 11?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So whoever that is, there we go. 11 versus 11. It's Arizona State, Nevada. I'll tell you, if it's Arizona State, that's going to be an interesting game with TCU as well. I like that game a lot. But overall, I think the first round, this is the first time I've looked around the first round, and there's not a ton of – the other one. How can you not love – Ed Cooley against Providence against Kentucky. Listen, you want to talk about – and there's not a single guy anywhere in this entire bracket I'm looking at here who has more pressure on him than to win probably at least 2 games than John Calipari. And Kentucky could easily lose to Providence. There's no question they could lose to Providence. He's got to beat them and then try and beat Kansas State just to get to the Sweet 16. And I'm going to tell you, I've watched Kentucky at times when I've looked at them and said, boy, this is unbelievable, like Illinois. Boy, it's a really good team. And then there's other times where it's like, these guys don't even like to play together. They don't even want to be on the court together. They don't pass the ball. They don't share the ball. They don't do any of those things. So that's a great game. And then, I'll tell you, a team that I think got royally screwed in some ways is Purdue. How do you end up with Duke as the 5 seed in your region? If you're a 1 seed. That just goes to show you the metrics. Sometimes you need to tweak the metrics a little bit. Duke clearly the last 10, 12, 15 games of the season is one of the best teams in the country. And you are Purdue. To get to the Elite 8, you've got to probably play Duke. Think about that. I don't know about that, but we'll see. This is the first round. This is the first year in a long time where there aren't a ton of first-round games that I'd say, boy, that's great. But Patino against Connecticut and Providence against Kentucky are 2 that you should absolutely keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'm excited to sit down at noon tomorrow, Paul, and do nothing for the next 2 days. That's kind of what I love about the NCAA tournament is, some years you have good matchups, some years you don't, but you always have those Thursday afternoons when everyone just like the whole world just kind of stops to watch some hoops. There's really nothing like it, I think, in the sports world these days.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think the next 2 days, really. What's funny, Adam, we talk about this all the time. There's guys like you and I who actually genuinely love college basketball, and we'll watch the whole tournament through. I would be willing to bet probably a quarter of the interest in the NCAA tournament is the casual fan who filled out a bracket somewhere, right? Filled out a bracket somewhere, and they are somewhat interested on Thursday and Friday, the first weekend. And then, a lot of those teams that they picked, that they, like their names or whatever, they picked, Cinderellas and whatever. A lot of those teams lose in the first round or the second round, and by Sunday, they're back to hockey or back to whatever, sports they like. And it's, the guys like me, I don't believe the NCAA tournament starts till next weekend. The Sweet 16 and in is when I really, really, really get dialed in, because I think, okay, now you've gotten rid of all the teams that were borderline teams. You've gotten rid of all the teams that have flaws. You know what I'm saying? You've gotten rid of a lot of the Cinderella stories. I know that people love the Cinderella stories. Adam, I gotta be honest with you. I just every time one of them loses, I'm happy, because I want the best teams to get through. I like the Sweet 16 when it's a lot. If there's 1 or 2 of those Cinderellas, okay. But if you get many more than that, then all of a sudden the Sweet 16 loses a little bit of luster, because there are some teams that maybe have a real easy route from the Sweet 16 to the Final Four because of some upsets. So I just think that's a part of it. But you're right. Thursday and Friday are the first day the world stops. Thursday to a degree, but Friday especially. People take off at noon and they're done for the day and done for the weekend. And they go to a bar somewhere with all their buddies and sit down and plant, and they watch, basketball all the way till, some of them are still sitting there at 10 o'clock at night when the later games are being played.
Yeah, I'm gonna have all. This is the first year I'm gonna have 4 TVs, Paul, all so showing every game in my basement. So I'm fired up to have them all on and just enjoy that setup.
So now that we did this on Selection Sunday, now that you've had a few days to digest it, what is your Final Four?
I think I'm going to I haven't officially locked the bracket in yet, but I think I'm sticking with Duke, Texas, UCLA, and Alabama. I'm feeling pretty good. Those were my first reactions. I haven't really deviated from that yet. So we'll see if I get cold feet on any of those, but that's kind of where I am. I know that's where you were on Sunday, Paul. Have you changed your mind about anything?
I like Duke. I definitely still like Duke. I actually am now. I'm sort of hedging my bet. I'm thinking I like Kansas over UCLA, but I might probably still go with UCLA. But that game, I think, is going to be. Bill Self wins a lot of games, man. He and I know UCLA's they're down one of their best players. I don't know if he's back or not. But on the other side, I still like Texas and I still love Alabama. So 3 of the 4 were still the same. We're probably still the same in the other region, but the more I'm reading about UCLA, I'm a little bit nervous that they might be a little shorthanded and might not be able to get all the way there. And looking at the rest of that, I'm not a fan of Gonzaga. I think UConn is okay. They're good, but I don't know that they're great. St. Mary's is the 5. I mean, I tell you, I'll say this. If St. Mary's, if they were to get, let's see, I saw a team in their region. If they were to get to play against whoever it is, you want to talk about a team that's hard to watch. St. Mary's is hard to watch. I mean, I'm sorry, not St. Mary's. Where's San Diego State at? They're somewhere over here. San Diego State is over on this side over here. Oh yeah, San Diego State. That's it. If the worst game that will ever be played, it could legitimately end 25-24. Is if San Diego State wins and Virginia wins, and you have San Diego State play. Have you watched San Diego State at all?
A little bit.
Oh my God, I can't stand watching teams that play that way. I was just like watching last night against Mississippi State. I was like, this is a close game, but I don't know if it's a good game. I mean, when you're watching a team that can't dribble and shoot, but they're big and strong and physical, and so they make it a defensive game. But San Diego State, that's how they are. I mean, they don't, and if they play Virginia, who wants to, dribble for 29 and a half seconds before they shoot every time, that could be a really ugly game. So we'll see. I just think there's a lot of charm in the first 2 days. And I root for the young, for the nobodies to make it close. But I want them to lose. In the end, I want them to lose. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this tournament, Paul, is like you look at the Big Ten. There wasn't really a great team other than Purdue this year. You look at the ACC. I mean, Duke's playing well now, but the ACC's doesn't have its great team. So I really think that kind of weakens the number of really consistent good teams that you feel good about and you struggle to pick between at this time of year. I think it's been a little easier for me to say, hey, there's only a few very consistent teams out there. I'm going to roll with them. And if they lose, they lose. But just watching the season as we did, it's you feel good about those teams that have been good all year, and that doesn't mean that you can't have an Indiana or an Illinois, like you mentioned, get hot and ruin everything. But that's just kind of where I'm landing for now.
The other team people keep talking about, and Adam, I've seen no indication from this team that there's some special run in them, but because it's Tom Izzo. Oh, Izzo in March. You've watched the Big Ten a lot more than me, but I probably have seen Michigan State, I don't know, 7-8 times, right? Is there anything about Michigan State that screams this is a team that's going to make a run?
No, they're pretty forgettable, and usually Michigan State, I've been that guy for like several years running at different points that said, man, I love this Michigan State team. They lost a couple games they shouldn't have, but I think they're going to be good. I don't have that feeling this year for sure.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing. They could probably handle USC, right? I mean, okay, big deal. They probably could handle Marquette, right? Although Marquette is a lot better than people think. I watched the Big East tournament. They're better than people think. I think there's a lot of people that think, well, they're just, they're actually a team that and Shaka's smart. That he has them playing the way he wants them to play. They score from 4 out of the 5 positions. You know what? They get after on defense. I like Marquette, but theoretically, Michigan State should have better players than Marquette, right? I mean, theoretically. So at the end of the day, okay, maybe he gets to the Sweet 16, but I think Michigan State could also lose to USC. I mean, there's nothing spectacular or special about them.
Yeah, I think they just don't stand out the way they have in past years. Paul, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, like I said, the next 2 days should be a lot of fun, watching all these teams and seeing, and maybe to your point, there's not any dominant teams. Maybe to your point, there's a lot more parity. And so as a result of that, maybe we'll see some upsets and things. It'll be a little bit one of those years where it's a little bit topsy-turvy.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah. Put it this way. It's certainly not the women's field.
Right?
Yeah. Where nobody is beating South Carolina. Unless they have a rash of injuries, nobody is beating South Carolina. And in fact, I don't even know if they'll play a game within 10 points. And it's one of these years where there's a super incredible team. You know what I mean? You look at it, and I don't know what the brackets are, but I can tell you Stanford is going to probably get to the Final Four as well, right? And there's probably about 6 teams that can actually win the national title. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think I saw that South Carolina's odds to win, futures odds are minus 220 already before you've even played a single round. Those are pretty. You're not making much money on them if you're betting on them.
Right. Well, you got to bet $220 to win 100, and that's not to win once. That's to win 6 times. But the reality is, and again, injury can happen. Aaliyah Boston can get hurt. The big kid could get hurt or whatever. And it maybe changes some things, but that team is so loaded. And it just goes to show you, too, the women's game has still got a ways to go to get to where the men's game is, because the women's game, there's still just not enough of those elite players. Mm-hmm. And so, you know what I mean? There just aren't. I mean, the talent pool is still a lot more shallow. And so, South Carolina probably won't even have to break a sweat until about the Elite 8. And then at that point, they're better than everybody else, but it's so different than the men, where, really, if you take Alabama out of the equation and say, who in the men's side has played well the entire year? I don't know that there's another team that you could make that claim. And obviously Alabama's good, but they're not dominant, So
yeah, it's kind of the absence of those dominant teams that makes them look so good.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, for a number of years, it was UConn. Remember, UConn, we went into the season, it's like everybody's playing for second. And when someone upset them, they lost a buzzer beater to Mississippi State or whatever it was like, holy, it's incredible, right? There's nobody like that on the men's side. Nobody. There's nobody on the men's side like South Carolina. If Alabama lost in the Sweet 16 to, whoever it is, let's see, Virginia or somebody, that would shock me. If I'm looking at, really, to be honest, I'm looking at Alabama's road. Their toughest game might be their second game, either Maryland or West Virginia, because their third game is not going to be tough. And then their fourth game would be, be someone like Arizona or Baylor or somebody like that. I mean, honestly, they should get to the Final Four, Alabama. I'm looking at their road. But my point is, if they lost to one of these other teams, it would be a shock, but wouldn't be like an all-time upset.
Yeah, it would be an upset, but it wouldn't be like anything we haven't seen before. Certainly wouldn't be like the 16 over Virginia that one year, if you remember
Right.
that. So, but Paul, thanks for your time today. I think we got a lot of good hoops talk to go with a lot of good Steelers talk. Please stay tuned for the rest of the week, everybody. Chris Carter will be back on the North Shore Drive on Friday, talking about whatever happened with Pitt. Or I think Pitt actually plays Friday, so maybe he won't be talking about them then. He'll be maybe talking about Penn State, maybe a little more Steelers free agency. So make sure you're signed up for that. Please pop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out with the YouTube algorithm. And please check out our subscription deal, $6 for 6 months of access to postgazette.com. Everything I'm writing, everything Paul's writing, everything all of us are writing. It's a great deal. It's just $1 a month. So make sure you're signed up for that. Paul, thanks for hopping on with me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next week.
All right, sounds good, buddy.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.